People say violence and the taking of human life is not a way to resolve problems. Can't work. But history shows that it very often does work.
Exactly.
Hello.
Yeah.
You.
That's me.
I recognize you.
Yes, I did interview you a few times.
Yes, I always remember. Yeah, I feel like it's more than many times, no?
I think it's the 5th time today.
So
No
cool.
way. Okay.
That's so exciting.
It's great to be able to chat with you guys today about this awesome project, which I was fortunate enough to watch, in my home on this, not that small screen, but, still. But first, I wanted to chat a little bit about, that movie first,
Cool.
that first 28-minute movie that you guys did together. I was wondering, it's been a while, 2009, Sundance, and then I was at this event in Montreal, that convention that you participate.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
7th and yes, incredible. The world science fiction.
That's where I got to watch the movie, and you did a little acoustic set as well. We got to chat a little. So I was wondering what guys hold as memories from that project, because of course you I think you met because of that project. You're a couple, you work together, you had the Basilica, but it started there, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, je m'excuse qu'on va parler en anglais. I'm apologizing that we're English speaking because Tony is not yet, but I mean, yeah, so 2010, we released that album, but you're right. 2009, we were at Sundance, and that's when we met Phoebe Greenberg and the Phi folks. And when we ended up releasing it on our own label, which was exciting to release an album and a multimedia project with a Montreal-based independent label. Tony, I do remember that the first time Tony met, I was watching, because we're doing an interview about Tony's films, I was invited to watch a rough cut of his first film called Severed Ways, The Norse Discovery of America, a Viking, he calls it backyard epic, like a very lo-fi, high concept period piece set in 1007. And we had mutual friends, and he wanted my advice on the soundtrack. He had ideas of getting Brian Eno, Judas Priest, other metal, like he wanted it was a very ambitious soundtrack, and he wanted someone in the music world to look at the film, maybe give him some ideas, maybe get the film into some music people's hands. And all I needed was a rough cut of Severed Ways to Fall in Love with My Husband. And that film, I mean, I remember thinking, there's no other person who's ever going to make this movie ever again. So this is a one-of-a-kind person. And within a week, I was saying, well, I'm making my new album and I have an idea, because my background is in photography and more conceptual art. I went to Concordia at the Fine Arts Department there in the 90s. And I said, would you ever want to make a film? Because I could tell he was such a music lover. So his music is very big in his films. Mm-hmm. Would you ever want to make a film with me around an album? It's a concept album. That's what Out of Our Minds, the film, which was our first project together, was taking the stories and mysticism and fantasy of the songs that I wrote for my record, and Tony translating that into a half-hour film. And it was a beginning of a many, now it's been, we've been together 15 years or so, and we haven't stopped working. And there's, a couple other movies that came after that. And then there was the founding of the Art Center, Basilica Hudson, which is in our 12th year now, and our 10-year-old daughter. So it's a lot of projects together.
A lot of achievements. So Tony, what are, the fondest memories you have from that period, from that shoot, of Out of Our Minds?
Well, it was another movie. I guess I've made 4 movies that all take place in the woods.
It's a big theme for you.
Yeah, so that was another extension. Yeah, just an amazing experience. I mean, when you're making these movies, and especially if you're making them sort of off the grid, you're with the small team, 15 to 20 people, and there's just an amazing camaraderie in that. And that's at the roots. I mean, Ted K isn't that much of a departure. Maybe we're a slightly bigger team, but just there, focused with like-minded people, trying to tell this visually and then sonically afterwards, and make experiential films. So Yeah, I mean, that's a really fun project because it was sort of the most expressive, no dialogue, just music, just visual storytelling, time travel. So the looseness of it, I look back very fondly of just sort of making a rock psychedelic film. You don't usually have that avenue. And I think also like as we progress and become more addicted to technology, we become more literal about everything. So what I love about that movie is it's just sort of this, stream of consciousness, tripped out journey. And I think
out of body experience almost.
Yes, aiming for that. So being young and expressive is super fun. And made trees bleed, so there's some visuals that are still ingrained in my mind. But I guess our one regret is I think it's hard to see, so we got to figure out how to get it onto iTunes because it's
I think I might have found it on Vimeo, aside from that little DVD I got.
Okay.
And for people, and for people out there, you guys got to find that movie and watch it, read the comic book as well, and listen to the record. This old trilogy triptych, it's amazing. Melissa, I told you before, I was really in love with that record, with all the collaboration with great, metal and rock artists like Danzig and John Stanier from Helmet and those guys, So, but what you said, Tony, about the woods, when I watched Ted K yesterday, so fast forward 12 years later, you got this brand new movie that showed premiere last year in Berlin, which is great fest. Did you got to go there to present
very
the
weird
movie? No?
experience. It was all online for just industry and press. So I was just literally at my computer hoping that news broke well and reviews went well, and for the most part they did. So it was exciting. But yeah, it wasn't until a couple months ago I finally got to share the movie with the audience. So.
And it's gonna be screening in Montreal, and in a few days on 15th of April at Cinéma du Parc. So that's the story of Theodore Kaczynski, a terrorist known as the Unabomber. There's been a TV movie back in the 90s. There's been a series as well. So I was wondering, why do you guys think people are attracted to true crime, first, as a setup?
True crime. I mean, what's interesting is I'm not so into true crime. And that's where I thought maybe interesting to take sort of one of the stock true crime stories and get rid of some of the usual tropes where it's just too much information. It also has the law enforcement side, which is so boring. I think we watch a lot of movies and have law enforcement, that villains would be much more interesting if we just stayed with the villains. So that was sort of the concept of just to see what it was like to be with this guy the entire time. So you would understand his existence and maybe you would wind up entering into his head, and how would that feel and how would it be uncomfortable, and how would it make you feel, and the fact that maybe you'd have moments of relentless rage, but also understanding how violent his acts and how heinous they are. So just how complicated the human condition is, the human beings are, and especially somebody that's so vilified, but also sometimes looked at sort of heroically too, just realizing that sort of neither one of those checked out, and kind of getting just into the gray and just sort of, in a way, the movie's sort of bigger than Ted Kaczynski, getting into themes of, where we are with technology today and the environmental degradation we're going through and the climate cliff that's approaching. It just all ties together. So Ted Kaczynski was in a way this vehicle to talk about some of these issues and have us sort of connect to the, to these
Yes, I totally agree with you, because it's much less about this crime than it is about it's a radical movie. It's not as you said, a cut and paste procedural movie that you used to see all the time.
Yeah.
It's about technology, nature, values, purpose, and destruction. All those themes collide together. It's really a glimpse into the psyche of a broken man. which, as you said, it's a brilliant man. He used to be a professor, and he's you know, he built bombs, so he's not a dumbass. And you're portraying that really well, but he's kind of struggling all the time with his values and what to do and not to do, or, you know, with punishment, you know. Yeah, but I was wondering how you guys got fascinated, you know, with that character. How that happened for you?
Yeah, you know, I guess just when the story happened, it was so fascinating, and it's just one of those things you step away from after it happens. You're like, what was that really about? And then
back in the 90s when you got the
yeah. So I was
okay.
you know, in high school, and then it's just like, whoa, and sort of after 9/11, and you know, talking about terrorism and American terrorism, looking at other people in history that were declared terrorists at the time, and then you know, where you know, history looks back at them very differently, and just realizing, like, how did this guy who lived off the grid with no running water, electricity, manage to carry out these acts and basically paralyze the country at times? And it was only with his extremely high IQ that he was able to pull this off. And in a way, being such a Luddite and off the grid, he was untraceable, right? So that was part of what made it work. So, and then being interested in the story, but as time went on, it got more interesting, right? And I think that's where we kind of, you know, 10 years ago talked about this story, and people were far less understanding of why you want to tell the story about this guy. But as time has gone on, you mentioned it nowadays, you know, people understand it way differently and realize, you know, what the manifesto was. His ideas were prophetic, and here we are, you know, holding the bag with technology, you know, basically, you know, turning us into, you know, against each other, polarizing us, and then distracting us at this key moment where we have to stay focused to deal with these big, huge threats like climate change, but we're not able to come together. So, you know, so this moment of technology in a way is coming at the worst possible time, where we really need like unity and focus to deal with some bigger problems. You know, so it's evolved, and I mean, it's been in our lives a long time, and Melissa could talk to it, of just, you know, we started 10 years ago doing a road trip through Lincoln, Montana, and just understood how important the place was. And that was a big thing, of filming the exact location where Ted Kaczynski lived when we did that road trip. And we were driving through these little roads in Montana in our little beaten up New York State Toyota Prius, and yeah, trying to understand.
So 10 years ago, so you guys did this, you know, road trip together. So how do you remember from that trip, Melissa?
Well, what's funny is that as Tony is describing all that, you know, as you know, I'm a Montrealer, and I, through this rock and roll fantasy, have a big life in the USA. But I've always been very torn, because I'm not only a Montrealer, but I'm also more of a socialist Canadian, and I don't. There's a lot about America that I am very, very allergic to, and that really pains me. And through meeting and falling in love with Tony, and even that first film, but then every one of our films, except for the psychedelic time travel one, is about America. And it's been, in some ways, Tony has been my tour guide to look at America in the more complicated ways, to review history, to look at the way that America draws these simple heroes. And so that road trip for us was not only a fun, you know, road trip, two artists, freelancers get to just travel, but it was to see America. And then he brought me down in the South, and we saw, you know, where the North and the South and the slave wars happened. So just understanding the heart of America. And what I, as the executive producer of this and the last film, Peter and the Farm, which actually was really successful in Quebec, it won the jury at the Festival de la Ville de Quebec. So Peter and the Farm is our last movie. And it's a similar thing where you're looking at a broken man, like we talk about, but like America is a broken country. I don't know if this is a news alert to anyone. But within that broken country, there's these things that are important to learn from, important to change, important to see, mainly the cycle of violence and the cycle of pain and self-destruction, and the cycle of isolation of people just that whole thing that Canada does not have, that thing where you're alone, that frontier mentality where it's the individual first, is not what Canada is. It is what America is. And it's a very strange, when I moved to the US, the first thing I recognized was the contrast between what I learned in school in Montreal was about Canada being the melting pot. Sorry, opposite. Canada, the Canadian mosaic. And that we are all, you're asked, I'd say, I'm Swiss, Montreal, Boston. Someone in America, they call it the melting pot, which is an immigrant can move there from any country and you become American and you erase your past. And so for me, living in the US, I always was honestly quite terrified by that idea of this becoming the flag, becoming America. And what, yeah, and I don't find that to be healthy in that, as we said at the beginning of the conversation, the black and white world that I believe that psychedelic films and music could just, if we just use that as our value system and communication system, it would probably work a lot better. It's these ideas of the way that it gets so basically, it's creating major conflict, as we know, if we don't see the in-between. So I think what's very brave about the way Tony took on Ted Kaczynski, and for me, it was a no-brainer to support him in yet another American question and an American history story, is that he goes in all in, the whole person, the whole thing, and does not take an opinion like this is patriotic or this is, punk and this is anarchist. Like you just show the picture so that, because the only way we're going to move forward as a society is to be honest with ourselves and to be honest with who our neighbors are. And as you know, we premiered it online at Berlin, but it was just a few weeks after the insurrection of the White House. And that Capitol, of the Capitol Hill, is that what it's called? Whatever it's called, that big place that the basically anarchists attacked the Capitol. And we realized at that moment that, wow, showing the story of Ted Kaczynski in the wake, yet another thing that makes you realize you have to think about what is this rage in America that grips people, kills people. And I think, some people, you started the question off with true crime. Obviously, I am the opposite of true crime. I am like literally psychedelic and emotional. And I want to know, I think it's important for even people like me to look at that story past, the rule of law, past the FBI, and into an emotional, spiritual being that was propelled for whatever radical reasons, obviously the IQ, high intelligence, deep pain and problems, but then this like power that is so profound. And if we don't start looking at those scary powers and that synergy, then we're not going to be able to live together. As we know, we see what's been happening through COVID, through Black Lives Matters, and then this terrible technology thing where everyone can just be such an asshole to the other person because there's no honesty and so there, that's kind of the other side and really admiring Tony's trajectory in this difficult storytelling of America and of broken men in America. And if we do not, if there's a time to look at broken male rage in America, it's right now. But guess what? Nobody wants to look at that or talk about that. They, unless it's being turned into a villain. But we're going to have to get a little bit more compassionate and deep than that.
I totally agree with you, because that's what Sholto Copley so very well embodied. He understood that man, and he lives in the shades of gray. It's you kind of going through that journey, which is this film, this slow burner. You understand the motivations and where he came from and why he wanted to do what he did. And I was wondering about Copley. Where did he enter the picture for that movie? Because he's great, he's amazing.
Yeah, no, I mean that, like Chris said, we've wanted to make this movie for a while. So started with the general casting of going to specific people, and then that just didn't work out. It takes some much time. It's this whole agent sort of system you have to deal with. And we just did an open call. And luckily there actually had been a bunch of Kaczynski projects. There was the Netflix thing. There was even another thing going with Viggo Mortensen, who was going to play an FBI agent, hunting after Ted Kaczynski. And Charlton was actually going to be another FBI guy. So he knew about the story. So it was kind of good, the timing of it. And then this script came across his desk and he was like, oh, I know about this. Oh, wow, there's this whole other side I didn't understand from the script I read. So he was super enthralled, and he was having his own issues with technology and seeing that was making everybody very unhappy. And
on board as producer as well.
He did. So he did a tape, and it was what you see on screen. It was so close. I mean, it was just immediately understood the guy, understood the mannerisms, and looking for somebody who was very physical and that you could believe could live off the land, even if it wasn't his natural habitat. I mean, Kaczynski grew up in the city of Chicago, but he learned as much as he could. So even if there were elements where he sort of seemed like he was an outsider, that was fine as well. So he was willing to come back and film over the seasons, and that was amazing. And that's what's so rare with actors, to have somebody that committed that they will return and they're not booked out, you know. So shave the beard, grow it back the beard. So he just went all in, thought it was an important story. As you know, people that know Charlton, diehard fans, and understand how how incredible he is. So I hope we see him in more films. But the way he was able to channel Ted just blew all our minds every day we were on set, and it was just a lot of fun. And he just that's as close as I think as you can get to portraying Charlton. And at the same time, like I was saying earlier, since we were filming on the exact location, which is sort of no longer in that condition, that's sort of as close as we could get to the actual experience by rebuilding the cabin on its exact footings. Wow. And using some of the exact the buildings that were left over, using his root cellar that had chemicals stashed in it that the FBI left behind.
Wow.
So retracing the footsteps is just a whole nother power of the story that comes through, whether there's moments we can't totally define what the impact was, but it is there. So yeah, just trying to approach it like a documentary, even though it's extremely cinematic. So wanting to tell with wanted every shot to say something, not have repetitive shots. So you just sort of be hypnotized into this existence of what Ted's world was, and take what you want from it too. I think that was a big thing of not trying to overly define things, so that having appreciation for the audience, that they can interpret, they can put these pieces together. They're an active participant, an active storyteller, and those are my favorite films. The films that say just say enough without
that's not pre-chewed for you.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I love.
It can get preachy real quick, and that's why also the edit did take a lot of time. I mean, we took luckily we had COVID, so it's a delayed thing, but needed to get that right, reduce it from 3-4 hours, and just get the balance.
And the fact that you guys went to Montana to actually shoot there, and it shows the commitment to just be in that space, to try to understand the man or what he lived through. And I guess for the actor, that was like just great to be able to be there. It's not a green screen, it's a green forest. It's amazing.
Oh, exactly. I mean, I think for an actor to then first of all be on screen all the time, right? I mean, what a it's very rare. I mean, he's on the screen I think 97% of the time.
Exactly. I guess with things like District 9, where we just discovered him, and he was awesome in that, but I guess was complicated not to be able to be with actual aliens. So with that movie, he was there all the time, and he went through all the emotions, and you were talking about sorry, my English is crooked, the editing process. I looked at the movie yesterday, and I saw everything that you did. It's there's a lot of color in your movie as well, a lot of greens and blues and reds, and the shifting in the editing with the colors, it's just so cinematic. It was like breathtaking, but the sound, as you said in the beginning, it's always really, the music is really important in your movies. So I wanted to talk about the soundtrack, of course, the score, Blank Mass.
Yes.
Score is amazing, but I'm sure Melissa has something to do with the soundtrack. I noticed a typo negative song during.
Hey, I have that same shirt. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And some Alice in Chains as well. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, Tony had really worked with Blank Mass the most, but I think where I come in is just supporting him all the way. Of the music is another part of the cinema. Is that having, it was me who wrote to Blank Mass to invite him. So I play a role in a kind of music supervisor kind of way. And we had invited him to play Basilica Soundscape, our alternative music weekend at Basilica Hudson a few years ago. And that's when we both saw the power, because, I'm a rock person, you're a rock person. Electronic music doesn't do, Tony had more of a kind of appreciation of drum and bass and electronic stuff in the 90s. I really was just rock music. So for me to find electronic music that really moves me is very rare. And Blank Mass live, who, for someone like me who likes John Stanier and drummers, a guy with a computer never does it. But the way that man took over our factory really blew me away. And we kind of, we both love music, Tony and I, so we both remembered him so clearly of, wow, that could be an amazing soundtrack. If you need a score that's not instruments, but he obviously recreates a lot of instruments in his electronic. He's very musical. He's like a musician who makes electronic music. So I just, we were thinking about who could be doing the score. And I don't remember who thought of it first, Tony, but we just knew right away when he, and Tony will explain, but we were very lucky that COVID hit. And Ben doesn't usually do, he's done some soundtracks, but he tours for a living as a big festival. He's a very successful touring musician. So we were very fortunate that COVID had him locked and able to score this film, and worked so well. And it's out right now on Sacred Bones, the label, a New York label, on vinyl and digital. I highly recommend it. It's beautiful.
It's a great label. They put out John Carpenter's music as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And we partner with them on some things at Basilica, so we know them, and we're very, it's exciting when a film is also a music fan project. So,
but going back to that typo negative song and that Alice in Chains song, Two Broken Men that we lost, unfortunately, on the soundtrack. I think it worked so good. It's perfect.
No, I'm glad you pointed out the typo negative. Peter Steele is in another way one of these Ted Kaczynski characters, and somebody actually loved her nature, but so broken, and died young at 48. And his whole story, just the empathy for him, and what a incredible, interesting guy he was, and how expressive he was through his music. So little kind of alignments of sound here and there, and obviously somehow the rooster ties into
the lyrics. It works so well. So I think we have to wrap up. I'm sorry,
it's okay.
Because there's 2 minutes left to the Zoom call. So and great classical music use as well through the soundtrack.
Ted Kaczynski's favorites too, so that was really important to kind of go between the sort of anachronistic sound of but also the motive, but mixed with what inspired him, what he listened to, and just
I can't wait to hear and watch it in the theater at Cinema Pack next week with you guys. It's going to be great. People, go see Ted K in theaters. It needs to be seen on the big screen. My little 46-inch TV is not big enough. So
the dark room experience. So
exactly
together, it has impact. So if you can make it happen.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me about that movie. You're a great movie. It's awesome. Today. And
merci, Christophe. I missed you. I'm sorry, making more music and projects we can talk about. So very good. Happy.
Cheers.
All right. Cheers.
See you soon.
My motive? I want to change the world.